Hey, now look, my title of the presentation might give this away, but I just want you to think about your perceptions of global poverty right now. Let's be real honest about what you think. Raising of hands. Just thinking about global poverty, whether it's growing, shrinking, staying the same. How many would say, I walked into the room, and really in my mind right now, I would say global poverty is increasing around the world? Who would think? A lot of hands. What about shrinking? Who thinks it's shrinking? Staying the same? Okay, well let's answer the question right now. So, look, in a recent Barna study, the question was asked, is global poverty growing, shrinking, holding steady? And 70% of people incorrectly assume that global poverty is actually increasing. And so it's a very common thing. We look at what's happening around the world. We see the pictures. We read things in the media. But again, I'm here to share some good news about that and about how things are changing. For many of us, the verse that comes to mind when we think about poverty, we start to have this thought that, poverty is too big of a thing for us to even address, or it's just, an overwhelming thing. As we look down, a verse that always comes to mind, and people quote this all the time, as Jesus is talking to His disciples, he tells them this. He goes, the poor will always be with you. And again, I hear we quote that sometimes. And what I want us to understand that this isn't really a time-bound universal statement about the poor. I mean, you look in the book of Proverbs just specifically, and you see God's heart for the poor, and you realize that doesn't really sound like God's heart when He says, we're just going to have poor. Because again, He's not saying this is how things should be. It's just how things are at this moment right now. And we can't let this creep into our minds and lower our expectations about what is possible for us to do in this world today. See, Jesus saying that we shouldn't fight poverty or help those in need, He was only given a description of the way things were. And the Bible repeatedly commands us to help the needy. It condemns those who take advantage of the poor. God told us in the Old Testament that I command you to be open-handed toward the poor and needy in your land. And Jesus also told the disciples, sell your possessions and give to the poor. And so as you can see here, and I've got some resources I want to give you here at the end, but I do want us to walk away, and I think the theme of today is just going to be hope. Because there is hope when we look at the global poverty and the issues that are happening today. Because for many of you as church leaders, y'all are going to be on the front lines of changing the perception of what is really happening in the world today, but then more importantly, what we can do in the future to change what is happening in the world. And so I just want to encourage you with that and do this here. So is poverty a problem? Of course. Is it a big problem? Yes. Is it a huge problem? Yes, of course it is. But again, there is hope. And I wonder if learning about what is possible is going to give us hope and the church hope and create a shift in the way that we are thinking, and hopefully create a shift in the thinking of the people that we are leading and we are guiding and pastoring here in the future. See, God says this about His heart for the poor. He calls the church to live integrated lives of worship, faith, and a pursuit to end poverty. So let's get into the research for a second. I promise we're not going to get too deep into this. Y'all are smart people and can see where we're going with this. But I do want us to help understand what's been happening in the world and the levels of poverty since 1990. See, the World Bank shows the data over the last 25 years, shows us that global and extreme poverty have actually decreased by 24%. And in 2012 to 2015 alone, there was 200 million fewer people living in poverty. You look, and one of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals was to have a lower poverty rate by 2015. And what happened was we actually accomplished this by the year 2010. So more than 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty since 1990. It is an amazing, amazing thing to see. But still, this is what I need us to understand, although that we still have so many people living off $1.90 a day or less. You know, even though it has creeped down, as you can see, from 1990 and gone down. This is a good thing, right? But still, in this world today, we have 700 million people who are living in extreme poverty. And 400 million of those are children. The most vulnerable, the most in need in this very extreme situation. Let me give you an idea of where we've come, where we are, and where we need to go. See, according to UNICEF, the under 5 mortality rate has been cut in half since 1990. Here's real numbers. It has gone from 35,000 children a day, under 5, dying of preventable causes, things like lack of clean water, malaria, and that number has actually went down to 15,000 a day. Man, that's an amazing thing, but 15,000 is still an unacceptable number, correct? We still look at it and go, there's still 15,000 kids dying because of very preventable things, water, malaria, things that we look and go, our church, our leadership, our people can address and do something about in a very easy way. Again, I want to be here to give you some hope, to continue to press forward, to continue to see the level of global poverty to go down. See, now many charities are working on sustainable goals to call for the ending of global poverty everywhere by 2030. And again, you can see how it's gone down almost everywhere, how it is dramatically decreased in what's happening. And let's be honest, like hearing these things, how do you feel? Man, I hope you sit there and you feel more optimistic. And I hope that gives us some optimism, and I hope that we are hopeful and that we are ready to engage even more with what's happening. But see, what we're going to talk about today as we continue down this is going, even though the level of poverty has decreased, people's perceptions of what is actually taking place really hasn't. And so again, that's where I'm here speaking to you as church leaders, as pastors, as organizational leaders, to say this is a message that we have to go and take to our people and go, there is a path. There is a way that we can see an end to global poverty by 2030. And again, because we're giving hope to people, we start to see how people get more engaged and how people can see a future and a reality they didn't even think was possible. And just think about this, the hope that we get from hearing these things. I want you to think about the hope that this could provide, that same type of hope that you could provide for a child that's living in poverty. Think about those 400 million children living in poverty, that if we can walk alongside them and say, this isn't the end, this isn't the only path for your life, there is a different route for you, and we can do that. Man, think about what hope for a child living in that very vulnerable situation can actually bring to them in the rest of their life. See, as we look at it, perception of poverty and the people who trust us give the church the ideal starring role in this to make a difference to end global poverty. See, 57% of adults, which is actually 11 percentage points more than 2011, say that knowing there's an end to extreme global poverty would make them significantly more ready to go help what's happening. Among practicing Christians, that actually grows to 62%. So what do people believe is the truth about global poverty? Again, like we said, 70% of the American public incorrectly assume that international poverty has increased since 1990, and 87% think it's either increased or stayed the same. So again, the large majority of people think we're not making a dent in things, that things aren't getting any better. But again, our message we have to put out there is that things are changing. So who's going to set this right? Man, who's going to educate? Who's going to inspire? Who's going to mobilize the masses to eradicate global poverty from the planet? And again, I hope you're getting our message here. You are. You are the people who are going to do that. You're the ones who are pastoring, who are standing in the pulpits, who are leading your classes, who are leading the ministries. You are the people who are going to stand there and say, together as the church, we can see a change in our world today. See, what we found out at Compassion International, we did a study with Barna, and just really understanding what was happening and what was taking place in our churches. And the role that a pastor, church leader plays in this right here is that we saw that 88% of the American public trust the opinion of a pastor when it comes to issues of global poverty. 92% of practicing Christians trust the opinion of a pastor when it comes to issues on global poverty, and then the actions to take place in doing that. Among U.S. adults, pastors are the most trusted source concerning the world's poor, tied to those who have worked or lived in poverty environments. So again, I'm going to say that it's you. It's you that the world is looking at. You have the eyes and the ears of the people who are sitting in your classes, who are sitting in your worship centers, and you really have the eyes and ears of people who haven't even been there yet. Because what's going to happen is, as the church continues to lead the way of social justice right alongside the gospel, what you're going to see is that more people are going to come alongside the church. More people are going to come alongside this movement that's taking place. You know, my time at First Priority, we worked with middle school and high school students, and you're seeing the heart of this generation that's coming in as leaders in our churches, and it is a heart of social justice. Now again, as pastors and leaders, we have to show them that justice and the gospel are parallel tracks that we have to walk down and we have to go through together. But again, I think as we continue to lead this movement, the world's going to come along and say, hey, they're making a difference. We're going to come alongside them as well. There's a huge opportunity here for you, your church, your pastors, and God has ordained Jesus commissioned local groups of globally based people to be the branch that is poised to do, as it says in Proverbs 31, to be the voice of the voiceless. Man, a great resource. Scott Todd, he wrote a book called Hope Rising. And in one chapter there, he really lays out the strategic calling, mission, and structure of the local church and why it is the absolute perfect vehicle to fight and eradicate poverty in this generation. It's the plan. We look at it and go, this is God's plan, this is God's only plan, and here's what it is. You know, in his book right here, he says the largest corporation in the world has 1.2 million employees, but the church is 500 times larger than that. Okay? Churches in East Africa, they wield a significant level of cultural, political, social, educational, economic influence. It can be viewed as the largest, most stable, most extensively diverse non-governmental organization in the country. Churches are respected within their communities and have the existing resources, structures, and systems in which to build. They possess human, physical, technical, financial resources they need to support and implement small and large-scale initiatives. They can undertake these actions very cost-effective and due to their ability to leverage volunteer and other resources with minimal effort. Again, we're trying to go all across the world to eradicate poverty, and what we see here is the church is already there. The church is in these communities, people who are invested and ready to do something there. Again, we need to walk alongside some of these churches in these very tough areas and enable them to do what God has called them to do right here. Scott Todd in his book also says that the presence must also be in a strategic location. Churches exist in exactly the right locations to serve the poor. Because I know I have, I'm sure you have as well. You've been in churches in the slums, in the villages, in the city centers, in the very rural areas, in the tough parts of town. You know, the church is present everywhere. And the church is not simply there physically, but the members are integrated within the community. Man, they are salt. They are light. They are woven into the fabric of that society. And again, we look at our call as Christians and as missionaries in the world, and we've got to understand that the people who are there, and again, woven into the fabric of this community, are the people who most want to see change as well. They have the most invested there in doing that. The church is uniquely durable. It is a local outpost of the body of Christ. The church has outlasted every corporation, every nation, and every empire. The church is ready. The church is there and is doing the work. The ultimate reason why the church is critical to the work of ending poverty is the promise of Jesus. Jesus was given the opportunity of the government and declined it. But Jesus could have started a business for social good, but he didn't. Instead, he established the church and promised this in Matthew 16, that the gates of hell should not prevail against it. The church expressed in a local disciple-making community, it was commissioned by Jesus and empowered by the Holy Spirit to advance the kingdom on earth. And the advance includes the eradication of the evil, extreme global poverty. And no other organization was founded by Christ and carries the promise of victory against the forces of hell. So again, the church is there. The church is ready. The church is standing in the toughest parts of our world, ready to make a difference. You have the voice of the people that we can, just pour into them and do some incredible things to make this difference. So we see the perception that the world has. We see the big problem that we have. There's a plan. But again, I want to go back to the theme of everything, is just talk about the hope for a second. The hope that we can have in the U.S. church, the global church around the world. But really, I want to talk about the hope of the people who are living in poverty. Specifically, at Compassion International, obviously, we're talking about the children who are living in poverty. What do you think that hope does for a child living in poverty? As I serve churches across the United States, and as I work with them, I'm often reminded, and I really get to teach and tell them what they already know. We often think that poverty is merely physical or economic. In our U.S. mindset, we go to that very quickly. But anytime, if any of us has ever been overseas, we've been to some of these frontline churches, we understand that a person lacking food, water, and adequate resources for their home, yes, that is poverty. But the truth is that poverty is holistic. It can be experienced in many different levels. There is economic poverty. Yes, we go to that quickly, but there's also social, emotional poverty that we see. There's developmental, there's cognitive, there's educational poverty. And of course, we probably see it more in the U.S. than anywhere. There's spiritual poverty in this world that we see. And the real nature of poverty is this: poverty steals hope. And we've got to be the church that brings hope back into these communities, back into these churches, and back into these families and these children that we are called to serve. And see, and regarding hope, there's some interesting research that's being done. Another resource, and I'll tell you these at the end, we've actually worked with an economist in San Francisco, Bruce Wydick, did a couple studies. He actually did a study regarding hope, and there was some interesting research that came out as he studied child sponsorship organizations. Because again, people look at child sponsorship organizations and they're asking, does that really work? What's really happening there? And as he found out is that these things do work. And as he looked and studied and dug deep into Compassion International in 2013, he found that child sponsorship is one of the most effective ways of alleviating poverty. That a child sponsored actually increases their life. They stayed in school longer. They were actually more likely to complete levels of school. They attained more salaried jobs. They were likely to become teachers, community and church leaders in their churches there. In 2017, he did the same. He came back and went even deeper with some of the children that were living in these communities. And he actually did a study called Poverty, Aspirations, and the Economics of Hope. And what they used was they actually used child self-portraits to measure levels of hope and aspirations in extreme poverty. Now I want y'all to do something for a second. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. You've got pen, paper in front of you if you got it. I want you to draw a picture of yourself in the rain. Real quick. Draw it on a napkin. Or if you don't have something, just picture. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. Draw a picture of yourself in the rain. anybody's art. Okay, I promise we're not doing that. But the whole study that Whiting did about hope was based on this one question. They walked in, they asked kids to draw themselves in the rain. And what's amazing is if you've ever studied, play therapy with children, what they draw, all those things, even the shapes of their heads to the colors that they use to how it's amazing what really comes out as you study this with children. Now, they did some incredible research. They were, obviously, these are economists, and they did this. And this is what they came up with. Now, I have no idea what this means, okay? I'm going to be honest. I just was like, all right. So let's move on from that. And so that's what they came up with. Here's what they found. And this was the logical side here, okay? You look at this child who drew this picture. Child in Asia, actually. And then you look at this child. The one major difference you see is the umbrella. It is amazing them able to tell just by, the attitude between these two pictures of where these two children were. And you can see it very clearly because, let's look, children are open books about things, right? They're very clear about how they feel about things. And again, fortunately, some very smart people were able to take this and tell us what was really going on. But here's what it came out of is that, man, hope matters. Hope matters. That we can come out and we can look at what's really happening through somebody, just through what's coming out in their drawings here. And I want to just read this, what Whiting said through this study. It said, it seems clear that pathways out of poverty can be restricted by lack of hope, even when tangible economic, physical opportunities are available. This is why interventions help to develop hope and aspirations along with tangible resources and may be the most effective at helping people escape poverty. And this is why I tend to favor holistic interventions that not only focus on issues of education, health, but spiritual, social, socio-economical development as well. Here's the holistic answer that only the church can do. At Compassion International, as we work in the countries that we do, it's a very simple strategy that we walk alongside these children in very difficult places. And we go back to Luke 2:52, is that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. And we say, we are going to focus on the educational, we are going to focus on the physical, the socio-emotional, and then the spiritual as well. Because again, if we're going to change somebody and bring hope to them, we have to bring hope holistically so that they can see their way out. So again, compassion, we feel, is an effective way of ending poverty with the church taking the lead. Now, I was sitting there drinking coffee, chatting with some of you earlier as we were waiting to come in here. And for a lot of people, they look at compassion and they go, man, I sponsored a child at 1997 at the Michael W. Smith concert. And I just want to share with you a little bit more about what Compassion's doing globally right now, and maybe give you some insight to how we're working and what we're actually doing. Now, again, the front door of what we do is child sponsorship, and here's why. The best chance of getting people involved is through direct, specific action. We can talk very big about the orphan crisis that's in the world today. But there is a specific thing about packing a backpack for a child that's in foster care who's going to need it. Somebody can hold on to that. You look at this and go, man, you're talking 400 million kids, but you can help one. Again, it's that specific direct action that we have. And so U.S. adults are more inclined to support clean water initiatives than global poverty alleviation, because cutting big problems into smaller, more specific things is attacking things with a SMART goal, a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-specific goal. And so, again, these are what I want you to take as ideas for you as church leaders on what you can do to help lead your church to alleviate global poverty in this generation. There's no better way of tackling this than focusing on a real person whom people can have a relationship with individually. Because again, we look at the one-on-one child sponsorship model at Compassion. The Wydick study proves it as well, is that it is the perfect route. Well, not perfect. It's a good route to have a real partner in the field because they have the church relationships and the expertise to manage and execute poverty alleviation strategies. So here's how we do this. And these numbers are actually from last year. The good news is that it's growing and we're able to reach even more people. So right now with Compassion International, we just want you to know a few things about us if you don't walk away with anything else. Number one, that we are Christ-centered with everything that we do. We are church-based. Everything that we do is in and through local churches on the ground, and that we are child-focused. So right now, we actually are in 7,300 frontline church partners in 25 countries around the world. Again, this is the church taking the lead to alleviate global poverty in their area. In December, we actually crossed, and we are working now with 2 million kids in these countries. And last year, we had 138,000 kids receiving Christ at these churches. Again, I think most people look at an organization like Compassion, and their first thing is we're helping feed kids. But I want you to understand that we are making disciples who are going to change their communities and change the world around them. Again, our goal in this, all those 7,300 frontline church partners is amazing, and they are the heroes of this ministry and what's happening. Man, our goal, we're looking for 100,000. And we are going and going this every single day because, again, we know that real change is going to happen through the local churches in these areas. Here's the thing. We work with pastors all the time, and we ask pastors, how can we help you? And 68% of pastors are saying they're just looking for ideas to implement. They're looking for practical ways for people to get involved. And we want you to hear from us at Compassion that we're ready to come and serve alongside your church. That it's not about just throwing out some packets, but we have a strategic partnership and a strategic model that we can walk alongside your church, your organization, to get you in the game, for you to be part of this movement and take the lead to end global poverty in this generation. Man, just think about it. 2030, not that far away. And if we continue to go down this path, and if churches will jump on board and do that, the amazing things that can happen in the space of global poverty in this world. So again, I hope you walk away from this. Number one, I hope you walk away with hope. That there is hope, that there is change happening, but then also that there is a path to see even greater change happening. That we can sit down and tell our kids, our grandkids 20 years from now, that we took the lead with the position that we had to make a difference in this. That we can go and really see an end to the struggle and the issues that are happening in the world. And so I just invite you to join us, to join the movement, to end global poverty. As you got your pens, I just want to give you a few things that you can just dive into, study this more as you're going through as I wrap up, and we can talk and answer some questions. First, hey, check out the Barna study, The Good News About Global Poverty. And I've got some brochures. I actually have some full studies up here if y'all are interested in doing that. A lot of this information also came from Scott Todd's book, Hope Rising. Just talking about the church's role in all this. Make sure you check out Bruce Wydick. You can just Google him and just the studies that he has done. A couple other resources if you're here, you've probably read this book. I mean, When Helping Hurts is something that if you haven't read it, I'll give it to you today. And just start with that one. The book God and Money, and then the other one is Child Church Mission. Are just some great resources if you're saying, hey, I want to lead in this. I want to lead in the place that God has placed me. That's a great place to start.